Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Been getting a lot of questions from viewers regarding finesse jigs, which ones I like to use, when I like to use them. So I thought I would do a breakdown of the 4 finesse jigs that I throw on a very, very regular basis. I would say finesse jigs probably make up half of the jigs that I throw. A lot of times it comes down to the fishery that I choose to throw them in and the water temp. So, when we're talking cold water period, like right now, I tend to prefer finesse jigs over a full size jig. And at the same time, if I'm fishing a mainly rock bottom area that's got more smallmouth, more spotted bass, I also like finesse jigs in that presentation as well. The full size jigs for me are more of like a summer thing when I'm pitching heavier cover, whether that's wood, whether that's grass, or I'm fishing a fishery that just has better than average size quality fish. So I throw jigs are a huge part of my arsenal, but finesse jigs make up a big part of that. And I know a lot of viewers out there know that. And that's why they're asking me about what finesse jigs I like to use and where and when I choose to use each one. So I'm going to walk you through these 4, kind of talk about the exact places, the instances when I like to use them, and why I think they shine under those circumstances. What I will say though, guys, is if you are looking for more jig fishing content from me, I've got a whole bunch of jig videos pretty much on every one of these jigs. I'll link one at the end of the video for you, but if you go back and search my jig, you search my channel, jig fishing, you'll find a whole bunch of jig stuff, like on the water, how I actually use them, the retrieves that I like to do. Because I do think more than anything, the retrieve style and the manner you fish the jig is every bit as important as the jig itself. And one other thing to keep in mind too, generally with jigs, you limit the number of bites that you get versus say a similar size plastic bait, but your average size fish is generally much better. So from a tournament standpoint, I love throwing jigs, but if you're just looking to catch fish, it may be better to go with a small downsized plastic like a Ned rig or something like that to generate more bites. But your average size will always be better on a jig. All right, so let's break these down, and I'll put links to these in the video. So if you want to check them out, you can check them out at Tackle Warehouse. Support the channel by doing that at the same time. But one I talk about quite a bit on the channel. This is the tightrope firework jig. It's a ball head design, hand tied. One of the absolute keys to this jig, though, is how tight they tie the collar and how short they trim the skirt itself. The reason that's important is it actually acts as a weed guard at the same time, meaning it's so short and bristle that it almost keeps the bait off the bottom so it can walk along the bottom. And at the same time, if you're fishing rocky areas, it kind of helps, it prevents you from getting snagged in some of those bigger rock crevices. So from that standpoint, for me, I love to fish this bait on like riprap banks. I love to fish it any place you've got some of that like slime, that moss that grows on the bottom. It tends to come over the top of that and not get nearly as much slime and that black silty stuff on your line. So if I'm fishing under those situations, the little tightrope jig is a great bait. Any place like the Ozark regions, any place I've had really good success at Cumberland on it, fishing a bunch of those big shale banks. Just an overall extremely high quality jig, good stout hook, single wire weed guard, a great bait, to keep you from getting snagged in rocky type areas or if you've got a lot of that slime weed on the bottom. If I'm fishing deep water and I'm trying to keep my bait down deeper but still get a small presentation and I'm trying to get some good bottom feel, that's when I like to go with a small tungsten Keitech tungsten football head jig. So this is a ½ ounce, real small profile. I'll actually trim the skirt up a little bit. From a trailer standpoint, I like to throw a lot of times just a Ned rig on the back of this, but I like it because it does get down deeper, it stays down deeper, and because it's a tungsten head, I can feel the bottom really well. This is a great one up here in the smallmouth world. And I will say one thing I do like to do with most of these jigs is I'll actually open the hook up just a little bit. It's important because you're talking about small hooks. Some of these hooks are like size 1/0, size 2/0. So you really do want to open them up just a little bit. That will help with your hookup percentage. but this guy is really my deep water jig if I want a small finesse presentation. Like I said, I'll use a net as a trailer. I'll throw a net as a trailer a lot of times on the tightrope jig as well, or a small chunk style trailer. Next up, this is the Picasso Little Petey. This guy is just an absolute little hammer, tungsten round ball jig head. Really good for fishing kind of like everything. You're just going down a bank, maybe you got a dock, maybe you got some rock, maybe you got a lay down, and you're just going down the bank fishing everything. This to me is the most weedless of them all. It does have those good titanium weed guards. This is one I've been catching a lot of fish on. But you can see it's got the little epoxy drip on the back. These are just absolute fish catchers. I can't say enough about them. I like to throw the little 3-inch Pit Boss on the back, but if you're just looking for like an all-around little tungsten jig to throw, this guy is an absolute hammer as well. And then the last one, which I talk about on the channel quite a bit too, is just the Keitech tungsten casting jig. This is a little bit more of your head design that comes through like that heavier cover better. In this case, I've pulled the weed guard out, which I do quite a bit, but I do like this one if I'm fishing around some wood, or if I'm fishing around some rock as well. It's got kind of a little bigger head, but if I've got, really where I like to fish it is if I've got kind of that stair-stepping, not bluff, but stair-stepping rock. So it's like that ledge rock you find in the Ozarks where maybe comes off the bank and then there's like a 2-foot ledge, and then it levels out, and you get, occasionally you'll have like a lay down tree that comes down that bank, and therefore you have a gap that that little stair step caused where the tree's at. This is just a really good bait for going down some of those rock banks that have that little stair step in it, maybe a random piece of wood here and there. But an excellent jig, little chunk trailer on the back. This guy's an absolute dynamite too. I really am going, with my finesse jigs, I feel like I'm going quite a bit more heavily towards tungsten. I just like the tungsten in situations where if I'm fishing around a hard bottom, it just generates a little bit more sound, and it's a little bit more compact. So when you're talking about finesse jigs, you want smaller profiles, and the tungsten lets you get some pretty good weight still on the jig, but it's a smaller profile, which to me is important. If you're talking about a bigger full-size jig, you going with a 1/2 ounce lead jig head fits the profile of the jig at that point, so it's not quite as important. But when you are talking about some of these smaller finesse jigs, I'm really going for as small a profile as possible, and the tungsten helps with that under most circumstances. But these guys are fish catchers, man. These are, I can't tell you the number of checks I've won fishing these. I can't tell you the number of big fish that I've caught. Like, just because they're smaller profile jigs does not mean that they do not catch big fish, because they absolutely do. If you're not throwing finesse jigs under today's pressured times where we have more anglers on the water than we've ever had before, you're going to get a lot more bites fishing these small jigs versus a full-size jig. And you still get the same thump. It's still that adrenaline rush that you'd have with, flipping a big jig around. But give these guys a try. That's all I'm going to say. Absolute fish catchers. I love every one of these. And it's not uncommon for me to have all 4 of them rigged up if I'm fishing, a pretty good jig bite somewhere in a rock-based lake. Anyways, guys, hopefully this helps you. Hopefully this answers a lot of those questions I've been getting regarding finesse jigs. If it does and you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. New video coming out tomorrow.